Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss a very important topic, and that is education during Vedic period and education during Buddhist period. We'll talk these two topics separately. The firstly we'll talk about education during Vedic period. So let's start our video. So in this slide, what you're seeing is the topic table of content. These are topic that we'll talk about during our video. Mm, so firstly, we'll talk about Vedic period and system of admission, language and method of teaching, aim of education, curriculum, form of educational institution at the time of Vedic period, the salient feature, and the contribution of Vedic education for modern education. And lastly, we'll conclude it. So Vedic period. The Vedic age itself is divided into two parts. The first one is yearly Vedic period, which is from 1500 to 1000 BC, and later Vedic period, and that is 1000 BC to 600 BC. Vedic education system. The ancient system of education were based on Vedas, and therefore it was given the name of Vedic education system. In the At the time of Vedic education system, the whole education system was revolving around these Vedas. The main source of knowledge at the time of Vedic education was these four Vedas. The first one is Rig Ved, Samved, Yajurved, Atharved, that occupy a very important place. Even that these four Vedas occupy a very important place in Indian life. The education system of Vedic period has unique characteristics and qualities which were not found in ancient education system of any other country of that world. This world system of education during Vedic period. Uh, at the time of Vedic education, before going to start their students' life, at the time students have to go through a ceremony that was known as the Upanan ceremony, and the age limit for Upanan ceremony was 8 years for Brahmins, 11 years for Kshatriyas, 12 years for Vaishyas, and the place of learning was called Gurukula. About the Gurukula, that used to be situated very far from the city, basically in the natural surrounding. uh, मतलब होता ऐसा था, जो ये गुरुकुलास होते थे, बेसिकली द दैट द होम ऑफ द टीचर, दैट ये उस टाइम शहर से हट के बहुत दूर जंगलों में बसाया करते थे. दैट वाज नॉट आर्टिफिशियली कंस्टिट्यूटेड. और ये जो गुरुकुलास होते थे, यहीं पे उस टाइम वैदिक एजुकेशन सिस्टम में जो आफ्टर द ओपन सेरेमनी बच्चे रहा करते थे गुरु के साथ और यहीं पे शिक्षा ग्रहण करते थे. सो now I talk about the Upanan Sanskar that earlier we discussed in the previous slide that after Upanan Sanskar, students become eligible to go for the study. Upanan Sanskar was considered important both in Vedic period and the post-Vedic periods. Even in the present time, it is a very important place in our cultures. And the Upanan ceremony was usually regarded as a second birth of individual. Second birth of individual. For the Brahmins, this become very important. Brahmins begins to be called a Dvija, a twice born or born again. From this day, his formal education was started. That means उपनयन संस्कार के बाद ही वैदिक पीरियड, वैदिक टाइम में बच्चों के फॉर्मल एजुकेशन स्टार्ट हुआ करते थे. इसके इसके पहले कोई फॉर्मल एजुकेशन नहीं हुआ करते थे. बच्चे अपने घर पे रहा करते थे और अपने परिवेश में अपने माता पिता से जो सीखना होता था, जो भी लर्निंग हो रही होती थी तो हो रही होती थी. बट आफ्टर उपनयन संस्कार their formal education starts. Language and the method of teaching. At the time of Vedic period, basically Sanskrit was the main medium of instruction, and there was two very popular principle, or you can say the method of teaching that was prevalent at the time of Vedic period. That was oral for the student of average intelligence. Uh, in this method, the teacher and his students, there used to be a verbal communication, verbal transfer of knowledge between his teacher and students, and the second was in thinking. for those who were highly endowed, that is Manan and Chintan. The role of a teacher and students. During Vedic period, the teacher-students relationship was of the ideal nature. The teacher was the protector of students in all circumstances. He was fully respected by the students. He occupied a very more dignified place than even than the father. The student was just like a son for the teacher. The student was always ready to execute any command of the teacher. Teacher satisfy the curiosity and needs of his students. The teacher used to nurse the students when he fell ill. That means there used to be very close relationship between teacher and the students at the time. Even you can say that they have the teachers have the teachers used to have the more dignified place even than father at the time. Objective of education. Overall, the main objective of education at the time of Vedic period was the salvation, attainment of moksha, or the highest form of self-realization. Along with it, the objective was used to be the physical, moral, spiritual, and intellectual power to achieve salvation. That infusion of piety, religiousness, preservation and spirit of ancient culture, all around development of personality, promotion of social efficiency and welfare in students, and that used to be the objective of education at the time of Vedic education periods. Curriculum. The curriculum during Vedic period was based on the study of Vedas. That early we talked that the whole education system during Vedic period was revolve around the Vedas. The main source of knowledge used to be the Vedas. So you can understand the curriculum, the basis of curriculum. What would be the basis of what can be the basis of curriculum? Physical education was also included in curriculum. In Vedic period, education was not merely theoretical; it was related to the realities of life. Various branches of learning were incorporated in the curriculum. A student had to learn riding, archery, wrestling, hunting, dancing, etc. The subjects of instruction varied according to the vocational needs of the different castes, from Vedas in case of Brahmins to the art of warfare in the case of Kshatriyas, and to agriculture and trade, arts, crafts in the case of Vaisyas. So form of educational institution in Vedic period, the first one is Gurukulas. जैसे कि हमने पहले भी बात किया, Gurukulas was used to be the home of teacher, where parents send their wards at the age of 5 years to 9 years according to their caste after celebrating their opponent's sanskar. That was basically a dwelling house of gurus situated in natural surrounding away from noise and bustle of cities. People lived under the roof of their guru called Antivasin, under the direct supervision of their guru. And Gurukulas, as the name indicate, was the family of teacher and his residence where the students used to stay during the Vedic period of study. So that means during education period, during the whole educational period, the students have to live uh, at the house of the house of their guru, where they get all the knowledge. So that used to be the Gurukulas. And Parishads. Parishad was bigger educational institution where several teachers used to teach different subjects. This may be compared to a college Parishad in Upanishads, has been used for conference for learned man assemble for deliberation upon philosophical problems. Sammelan. Sammelan literally means getting together for a particular purpose. In this type of educational institution, a scholar gathered at one place for learned discussion and competition, generally on the invitation of king. So now I'll talk about the salient feature. Salient feature was infusion of spiritual and religious values, character formation, personality development, practicability, high place of Indian culture, simple living, high thinking, arm system, celibacy, and brahmacharya. So infusion of spiritual and religious values. education without religion instruction was not education at all. It was believed that the keener appreciation of spiritual values could be fostered only through a strict observation of religious rites, character formation, and personality developments. That was also one of the most important feature of Vedic periods. uh, High place to Indian culture. Indian culture was full of religious feeling, and it was assigned a very high place in the field of education, celibacy, and brahmacharya. The brahmachari, after his education in Gurukulas, went back to society to serve the rich and poor, to relieve the disease and distress. After a certain period of studies, he was required to become a householder and perpetuate his race and transmit his culture to his own offsprings. Arm system. Arm system is this basically the students had to bear the responsibility of feeding both himself and his teacher. This was done through the begging for alms, which was not considered bad. That means arm system was basically like as we discussed earlier that at the time of education at the time of Vedic period, students have to live to their guru's house, and at that time they at the time उन्हें उन्हें मतलब अपने अपने टीचर्स की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी भी उठानी पड़ती थी। फीडिंग के लिए उन्हें बाहर गांव में जाना होता था, जहाँ पे लोग रहा करते थे, और उन्हें भी भिक्षा मांगनी होती थी। एंड एट द टाइम दैट वाज नॉट कंसिडर्ड बैड। Development of civic responsibility and social values. The inculcation of virtues and social values was an equally important objective of education in India. They were required to be hospitable to the guests, charitable to the needy. Women education. During Vedic age, women were given full status with men. They were honored and respected in society. Gopamudra, Gargi, Apala were some of the great women sages. Contribution of Vedic education for modern education. The first one, discipline, teacher people relationship, teaching methods, all around development of child, education of self sufficiency, skill development. As uh, as we discussed that during the education system in the Vedic period, the it was what was the relationship between the teachers and the students. Even that we discussed that for teachers has a place, has more dignified place than even than father. And what about the teaching method, like oral, and the second one was chintan and manan. So teaching method was also varied for the students' capabilities. Even during the Vedic periods, the education system was focused on all around development, like holistic development of a child, from physical, mental, uh, from acquiring that intelligence, so that they can differentiate, they can develop, they can acquire the scruple to differentiate what is morally correct and incorrect. Education for self sufficiency. That means even in the Vedic period also there was a vocational course, like the students were trained so that they can live their social life also. So lastly, conclusion. In Vedic era, education was considered as pure and significance for society. Education was must for everybody becoming cultured. Relationship between gurus and peoples were very cordial during Vedic periods. A great importance was attached to Vedas in education system, as we discussed. Self-study. Swadhan was that is Swadhya was considered more important during Vedic period. So that's all about the Vedic period. Now let's go to and discuss about the education during Buddhist period. In this, we'll talk about introduction, system of education, aim of education, curriculum, method of teaching, and lastly, we'll conclude it also. So, Buddhist period in Indian education roughly start from 600 BC and last for about 1200 BC till 1200 years till 600 BC. As we discussed in Vedic education system, that it was the basic source of Vedic education system was Vedas, and in here in during the education system during the Buddhist periods, Buddhist education was based on teaching of Gautam Buddha, and the chief aim of education was the spread of Buddhist religion and the attainment of nirvana, a kind of moksha, through it. The monasteries were the center of education during Buddhist period, and beside monasteries, there were no other organization for imparting education. Only the Buddhists could receive religious and other type of education. Other persons were deprived from this facility. So, system of education in Buddhist period, a student had to stay in sangha or vihara, like as we discussed in Vedic period. That's for getting education. The students have to live in gurukulas, the home of their gurus. In here in Buddhist period, students had to stay in sanghas or viharas. The total period of education was 22 years, which of 12 years as a pabaja and 10 years of upsampada. The boys went out for their families and joined these monasteries. After the admission to Sangha, they could remain a monk, living their former caste, race, character, etc. That means once a child get admission in these monasteries, if they want to continue as a monk, they can. They could remain a monk, but if they don't, they can leave it. All castes were allowed to get admission in the monasteries. There was no discrimination on the basis of caste. Everyone was equally valued. Everyone has equal rights. If they want to get study, they can join these monasteries. Uh, so Pabaja ceremony. Pabaja was an accepted ceremony of Buddhist monasteries. This is a orientation, a kind of orientation uh, program. Like education during Buddhist period started with a ritual or admission ceremony known as Pabaja. Pabaja literally means going out. The minimum age for this ceremony was 8 years. When a child was admitted in monastery, he or she had to shave his head. As you can see the ceremony in this picture, dress himself or herself with a yellow cloths, put his or her forehead at the feet of his or her teacher, and recite the following three words like I seek the shelter of Buddhas, I seek the shelter of Sangh, I seek the shelter of Dharma. Educational period of Pavaja phase was 12 years, and after this ceremony, students was known as a sermon. Upsampada ceremony. After Pavaja, the Buddhist monk had to undergo the Upsampada ceremony, and this ceremony was different from Pavaja ceremony. It was after receiving education for 12 years, that it is the age of 20 years, Upsampada ceremony was performed, which marked the entry into higher education. That means, as we discussed earlier, that during the Buddhist period, there was the whole period of education used to be 22 years. The first 12 years, they have to, for the first 12 years, they had to go through a ceremony, Pavaja ceremony, and after the completing this 12 years, for the entry in the higher education, they go through this Upsampada ceremony. The sermon has to present himself in front before all the other monks of the monasteries. One could be admitted for his ceremony only when the majority of monks voted in the favor of the same. After this ceremony, the sermon was regarded as a full-fledged member of monastery. So that means कि any sermon that after leaving all the caste and religious entities and taking admission in monasteries, when and after getting education for 12 years, when you want to enter in the higher education, you go through this ceremony. एंड इसमें क्या होता है कि आपको अपने आप को जितने मॉन्क्स होते हैं उस मॉन्स्ट्रीज में उनके समक्ष अपने आप को प्रेजेंट करना होता है, और जब तक मोस्टली मॉन्क्स आपके फेवर में वोट ना करे कि या यू कैन कंटिन्यू एज अ मॉन्क एंड यू आर एलिजिबल फॉर गेटिंग हायर एजुकेशन, यू कांट बी एडमिटेड for the higher education at the time. The aim of education during Buddhist period. The goal of Buddhist education is to attain wisdom in Sanskrit language of ancient India. The Buddhist wisdom are called Anuttara, Samyak, Sambodhi, meaning the perfect ultimate wisdom. And like Vedic periods, the aim of education during Buddhist period was also the physical development, mental development, moral and spiritual development, formation of character, attainment of salvation, or you can say nirvana, preparation for life. That means it was also focused in this period also the education system, the whole education was focused on overall development, that means holistic development of students. Curriculum of elementary education during Buddhist period, the curriculum of elementary education included reading, writing and arithmetic. Curriculum during this period also included grammar, Naya science of reasoning, Hitu Vidya logic, Silpi Vidya arts and craft. Curriculum of higher education. Education during Buddhist period was well organized. As we discussed, like there was an institution called monasteries and viharas where you get where you have to get admission for getting education at the time of Buddhist period. So it was basically a well organized system at during the Buddhist periods. Higher education was given in Buddhist monasteries and Buddhist universities. During this period, emphasis was on the theoretical and practical subjects and knowledge. Curriculum of education included the study of Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedas, out of which a third Veda was left. Like that means the whole education system was basically based on the three Vedas: philosophy, metaphysics, logic, astronomy, astrology, medicine and surgery, politics, yoga, Ayurveda, military science, history, Puranas, grammars, etymology, etc. comprise important subject of study in the curriculum of higher education at the time of Buddhist period. So method of teaching, imitation method, discussion method, question answer method, lecture method, tours method, conference method, example method, self-study method, demonstration method. These are the some method that was prevalent at the time of Buddhist period. So finally we are at the end of our video. So so finally, we can say that a chief aim of Buddhist education was all around development of personality, which included its physical, mental, moral, and intellectual development. Buddhist education was wide open and available to the people of all walk of life. Monasteries were the center of Buddhist education. The curriculum was spiritual in nature. The method of teaching was mostly oral in nature. And the medium of Buddhist education was the common language of the people. The teacher-pupil relationship were very cordial at the time of Buddhist education. So that are the references. Thank you.